Clarity is often described as a gift. People spend years chasing it. They read books, study human behavior, search for answers, and work hard to understand themselves and the world around them. Yet there is a side of clarity that rarely gets discussed. A side that remains hidden behind the popular idea that awareness automatically leads to freedom and peace. The truth is far more complicated. The more clearly you see reality, the more difficult it becomes to participate in the illusions that make life comfortable for most people. What begins as insight slowly turns into a burden, not because knowledge itself is painful, but because knowledge changes the way you experience everything around you. The conversations that once felt meaningful begin to reveal hidden motives. The relationships that once felt secure begin to expose cracks beneath the surface. The social rules that most people follow without question suddenly start looking like performances designed to maintain appearances rather than express truth. Many of history's deepest thinkers quietly struggled with this reality. The ability to see beyond the surface often came with isolation, disappointment, and a growing distance from the world around them. Modern psychology has revealed an interesting fact. Human beings depend heavily on mental shortcuts, comforting beliefs, and personal narratives to maintain emotional stability. In other words, many of the stories people tell themselves are not necessarily accurate. They are useful. They help people function. They help people belong. They help people avoid uncomfortable truths. But once a person begins seeing through those stories, there is no simple way back. Awareness changes the lens forever. This creates a silent conflict that few people understand. You begin noticing patterns that others miss. You recognize manipulation before it happens. You sense tension behind polite words. You see insecurity hiding behind confidence. You notice the difference between what people claim to value and how they actually behave. At first, this feels empowering. Then a different feeling starts to emerge. A feeling that many highly aware people experience but struggle to explain. The feeling of becoming a stranger in places that once felt familiar. Throughout this video, we will uncover the hidden cost of seeing too clearly. We will explore why awareness often leads to loneliness, why people sometimes resist those who notice uncomfortable truths, how over-awareness can quietly damage your peace of mind, and why wisdom requires far more than simply recognizing reality. We will also reveal a surprising distinction that most people never learn: the difference between awareness and cynicism. Understanding that difference may change the way you view yourself and everyone around you. By the end of this video, you will understand why clarity can feel like both a blessing and a punishment, why some truths create freedom while others create distance, and how to protect your peace without turning away from reality. Stay with us until the very end, because the final lesson may completely change the way you think about intelligence, perception, and emotional strength. Welcome to the channel. If you enjoy deep explorations of psychology, human nature, self-awareness, and the hidden forces that shape behavior, make sure to subscribe and join us for more thought-provoking journeys into the depths of the human mind. The first loss is rarely dramatic. There is no announcement, no warning, no clear moment when a person realizes that the world is not exactly what it seemed to be. Instead, it happens slowly, almost quietly. During childhood, life is built on simple narratives. Good people are good, bad people are bad. Honesty is rewarded. Kindness is always appreciated. Love is unconditional. Friendship is permanent. Effort guarantees success. These stories help us make sense of a complicated world. They provide structure. They create safety. They allow us to move through life with trust. But as awareness grows, those simple narratives begin to crack. The person who speaks about honesty may secretly deceive others. The friend who promises loyalty may disappear when circumstances change. The individual who appears confident may be driven by fear. The person who seems generous may expect something in return. Gradually, reality becomes less black and white and far more complex. This realization can be unsettling because the mind naturally prefers certainty. People want clear answers. They want predictable outcomes. They want to know who can be trusted and who cannot. Yet human nature rarely operates in such simple categories. Most people are mixtures of contradictions. Someone can genuinely care about others while also acting selfishly. A person can love deeply while still causing pain. An individual can speak the truth in one situation and hide it in another. Awareness begins when you stop looking at people as fixed characters and start seeing them as complicated human beings driven by emotions, fears, desires, insecurities, and personal interests. At first, this deeper understanding feels empowering. It feels like waking up from a dream. You begin noticing details that once escaped your attention. Small inconsistencies become visible. Certain behaviors no longer make sense on the surface because you can see the motivations underneath. The words people speak become less important than the emotions behind them. Their actions begin telling a different story. This is where many comfortable illusions start collapsing. You realize that appearances often serve a purpose. Many people are not presenting their true selves. They are presenting versions of themselves designed to gain approval, avoid rejection, maintain status, or protect their image. This does not mean everyone is dishonest. It simply means that human beings are complicated. Most people spend years building identities. They create stories about who they are. They repeat those stories until they become part of their self-image. The challenge is that these stories are not always completely true. People often hide parts of themselves, not because they are evil, but because they are afraid. Afraid of judgment, afraid of vulnerability, afraid of losing acceptance. Once you recognize this, social interactions begin to look very different. You start noticing how often people adjust their personalities depending on who is watching. You notice how confidence can disappear in certain situations. You notice how kindness sometimes appears when there is an audience. You notice how opinions change depending on social pressure. Many relationships survive because certain truths remain unspoken. People agree not to look too closely. They overlook inconsistencies. They ignore warning signs. They accept convenient explanations. In many cases, this is not even a conscious decision. It happens automatically. The mind protects emotional stability by filtering comfortable information. Yet, awareness weakens that filter. The more clearly you see, the harder it becomes to ignore what is directly in front of you. You start recognizing patterns that repeat across different people, different environments, and different situations. Soon, a strange shift begins to occur. Human behavior becomes surprisingly predictable, not because people are simple, but because many emotional drives are universal. The desire for validation, the fear of rejection, the need for control, the pursuit of the avoidance of discomfort. These forces influence behavior more often than most people realize. Once you begin recognizing them, certain situations feel familiar even when the faces change. A person makes promises they never intend to keep because they want immediate approval. Someone seeks constant attention because they depend on external validation to feel valuable. Another person subtly manipulates conversations to maintain power and influence. Different individuals, different circumstances, yet the underlying pattern remains remarkably similar. This stage of awareness can feel both fascinating and disturbing. Fascinating, because the hidden structure beneath human behavior becomes visible. Disturbing because many actions that once seemed unique begin looking repetitive. You notice how people often repeat the same mistakes despite knowing the consequences. You notice how unhealthy relationship dynamics can continue for years. You notice how individuals complain about problems they secretly contribute to. You notice how some people seek solutions while others seek sympathy. The more attention you pay, the more obvious these cycles become. One of the most difficult patterns to recognize is emotional manipulation. Not because it is rare, but because it often appears in subtle forms. It can hide behind guilt. It can disguise itself as concern. It can appear as kindness, obligation, or emotional pressure. Many people are not even aware they are doing it. They have learned certain behaviors because those behaviors help them achieve desired outcomes in the past. Once awareness sharpens, these patterns become easier to detect. You begin noticing when affection is conditional. You recognize when praise is used strategically. You see when guilt is being used to influence decisions. You identify when emotional reactions are designed to create control rather than understanding. At the same time, empty promises become easier to recognize. Not because you become cynical, but because you begin paying attention to consistency. You learn that words alone reveal very little. Patterns reveal far more. Anyone can make promises during moments of emotion. Anyone can describe future intentions. The real question is whether behavior matches those intentions over time. Awareness shifts your focus away from isolated events and toward repeated actions. You stop evaluating people based on what they claim and start evaluating them based on what they repeatedly do. As this process continues, social performance becomes increasingly visible. Many interactions are influenced by invisible rules. People often present versions of themselves that fit specific environments. They display confidence, competence, kindness, intelligence, or success because those traits are rewarded. Again, this does not necessarily make them deceptive. Social life requires adaptation. The challenge is recognizing when performance completely replaces authenticity. Some people become so attached to their public image that they lose connection with who they actually are. Awareness allows you to see the gap between appearance and reality. Sometimes that gap is small, sometimes it is enormous. The deeper your awareness becomes, the harder it is to return to a simpler perspective. This is one of the silent consequences of seeing clearly. Certain patterns become impossible to ignore. Once you recognize manipulation, you notice it more frequently. Once you understand insecurity, you begin seeing how often it drives behavior. Once you recognize status seeking, you see it influencing conversations, decisions, and relationships. It is like learning a new language. Before learning it, the symbols meant nothing. After learning it, meaning appears everywhere. This creates a challenge that many highly aware people struggle to explain. The world remains the same, but your experience of it changes. Conversations that once seemed interesting start feeling repetitive. Predictable emotional cycles become easier to spot. Social dramas begin following familiar scripts. You start hearing the same fears expressed through different words. You start seeing the same insecurities hidden beneath different personalities. Over time, this can create a feeling of distance. That distance is often misunderstood. Many people assume awareness creates arrogance. They assume the observer believes they are better than everyone else. In reality, the experience is usually very different. The problem is not superiority. The problem is separation. The more clearly you recognize certain patterns, the harder it becomes to participate in them. The excitement others feel may seem temporary because you already see where the cycle is heading. The conflict that consumes someone's attention may appear predictable because you recognize the emotional forces involved. The conversation that feels meaningful to others may feel repetitive because you have heard the same pattern many times before. As a result, loneliness begins to appear in unexpected ways. Not physical loneliness, psychological loneliness. You can be surrounded by people and still feel disconnected. You can participate in conversations while feeling distant from them. You can care about others while sensing that they do not fully understand your perspective. Awareness changes what captures your attention. Surface-level interactions often become exhausting because your mind automatically searches beneath them. You listen to the words, but you also notice the emotions underneath. You hear the explanation, but you also recognize the hidden fear. You see the smile, but you also detect the insecurity behind it. This constant perception can become tiring. Not because people are disappointing, but because deeper awareness creates a different relationship with reality. Many conversations begin feeling incomplete. Many social interactions feel constrained by unspoken rules. You start noticing how often people avoid honesty when honesty threatens comfort. You notice how frequently individuals defend beliefs that no longer serve them. You notice how much energy is invested in maintaining identities. The result is a growing sense of being present, yet disconnected. Present because you are physically there. Disconnected because your perception operates on a different level than the conversation around you. You begin realizing that understanding people does not automatically create connection. In some cases, it creates the opposite. The more accurately you see what drives behavior, the more difficult it becomes to ignore the distance between appearance and reality. This becomes even more complicated when others sense your awareness. Most people are comfortable being observed. Very few are comfortable being understood. Awareness has a way of exposing contradictions. It highlights inconsistencies between words and actions. It reveals gaps between identity and behavior. Even when you say nothing, people can sometimes feel that you notice more than they expected. That feeling can create discomfort. Human beings naturally protect their self-image. Everyone carries beliefs about who they are. Those beliefs provide stability and meaning. When awareness challenges those beliefs, resistance often follows. Not because people are malicious, but because protecting identity is a powerful psychological instinct. A person who sees themselves as generous may struggle to accept selfish motives. Someone who views themselves as honest may resist evidence of dishonesty. Individuals defend the stories they tell themselves because those stories shape their sense of self. This is why truth is not always welcomed. People often claim they want honesty, but honesty becomes difficult when it threatens comfort. Awareness can unintentionally place pressure on those around you because it highlights realities they may prefer not to examine. Many individuals would rather preserve familiar illusions than confront uncomfortable truths. The illusion feels safer. The truth demands change. As a result, the observer often becomes the problem, not because they are wrong, not because they are attacking anyone, but because their awareness reflects realities that others would rather avoid. The mirror is rarely blamed for creating the reflection, yet people often react to awareness as if it were the source of their discomfort. The clearer you see, the more frequently you encounter this reaction, and the more you begin understanding that awareness changes far more than perception. It changes your relationship with people, with society, and with the stories that once made the world feel simple. There comes a point in the journey of awareness when the gift begins to reveal its shadow. At first, seeing clearly feels empowering. You notice things others overlook. You understand people more deeply. You recognize patterns before they fully emerge. You become harder to deceive, harder to manipulate, harder to control. But awareness has a hidden danger that few people talk about. The same ability that helps you understand reality can eventually begin to consume your peace. What starts as observation can slowly become constant analysis. What begins as insight can become mental exhaustion. The mind becomes so focused on understanding everything that it forgets how to rest. Many people assume that more awareness always leads to a better life. Yet awareness without limits can become a burden. The mind starts examining every conversation, every action, every expression, every silence, every small change in behavior. Instead of simply experiencing life, you begin dissecting it. You search for meanings beneath meanings, motives behind motives, hidden intentions behind ordinary actions. Even moments that should feel simple become complicated. A casual comment becomes something to analyze. A delayed response becomes something to interpret. A change in tone becomes something to investigate. The mind becomes a detective that never stops working. At first, this constant analysis feels productive. It feels intelligent. It feels like preparation. You convince yourself that understanding everything will protect you from disappointment. You believe that if you can identify every possible threat, every hidden motive, every potential betrayal, then you can avoid pain. But the human mind was not designed to live in a permanent state of investigation. It needs moments of stillness. It needs trust. It needs uncertainty. When awareness becomes excessive, the search for understanding turns into a search for control. And control is an addiction that can never be fully satisfied. This is where hypervigilance begins to appear. Hypervigilance is not always dramatic. It does not always look like fear. Sometimes it looks like caution. Sometimes it looks like intelligence. Sometimes it looks like being observant. Yet beneath the surface, the mind remains constantly alert, constantly scanning, constantly preparing. Every environment becomes something to evaluate. Every person becomes someone to assess. Every interaction becomes a situation to monitor. Instead of feeling present, you feel watchful. Instead of feeling relaxed, you feel prepared. The problem with hypervigilance is that it slowly steals peace. The mind becomes trapped in a state of readiness. Even when nothing is wrong, it searches for signs that something might be wrong. Even when a situation is safe, it looks for hidden risks. Even when a relationship is healthy, it searches for possible problems. Over time, this creates exhaustion. Not physical exhaustion, mental exhaustion, emotional exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying invisible weight every day. Many highly aware people experience this without realizing it. They think they are simply being careful. They think they are protecting themselves. Yet their minds never truly rest. There is always another possibility to consider. Another pattern to analyze, another motive to uncover, another layer to examine. The result is overthinking. Thoughts begin multiplying faster than answers. One question creates another question. One observation creates another interpretation. The search for certainty becomes endless because absolute certainty does not exist. Overthinking creates a strange paradox. The more you think, the less clarity you often feel. Instead of reaching conclusions, you become trapped between possibilities. You see multiple perspectives at once. You understand different motives. You recognize conflicting explanations. The mind becomes crowded with information. What once felt like awareness begins to feel like noise. Decisions become harder. Trust becomes harder. Peace becomes harder. As this process continues, another danger emerges. Emotional detachment. Many people believe emotional detachment is strength. They see it as evidence of wisdom or self-control. But emotional detachment often develops as a defense mechanism. When the mind spends too much time analyzing human behavior, emotions start feeling risky. Vulnerability starts feeling dangerous. Connection starts feeling unpredictable. Instead of fully participating in life, you begin observing it from a distance. This distance can feel safe. Observers rarely get hurt as deeply as participants, yet they also miss experiences that require openness. They miss moments that require trust. They miss relationships that require vulnerability. They miss opportunities that require uncertainty. The more detached you become, the easier it is to protect yourself. But the easier it becomes to protect yourself, the harder it becomes to truly connect. There is another consequence that develops quietly: cynicism. Cynicism rarely arrives all at once. It grows gradually. It begins with disappointment. Then repeated disappointment becomes expectation. The mind starts collecting evidence. It remembers every betrayal, every manipulation, every broken promise, every selfish action. Slowly, those experiences begin shaping perception. Instead of seeing individual behaviors, you start creating general conclusions. One dishonest person becomes evidence that honesty is rare. One betrayal becomes evidence that trust is dangerous. One disappointment becomes evidence that people cannot be relied upon. This is where awareness starts becoming distorted. Because awareness is supposed to reveal reality. Cynicism begins filtering reality. Awareness notices both strengths and weaknesses. Cynicism notices mostly weaknesses. Awareness seeks understanding. Cynicism expects disappointment. The difference may seem small at first, but it grows larger over time. A cynical mind often feels intelligent because it is difficult to surprise. It predicts negative outcomes. It anticipates selfish motives. It expects people to fail. When those predictions come true, cynicism feels justified. But there is a hidden cost. The mind becomes blind to possibilities that do not fit its expectations. Acts of kindness become suspicious. Genuine intentions become questionable. Trustworthy people become difficult to recognize because cynicism interprets everything through the same lens. This naturally affects trust. Trust becomes one of the biggest challenges for highly aware individuals. The more clearly you understand human flaws, the harder it can be to rely on others. You know what people are capable of. You understand how emotions can change. You recognize how circumstances influence behavior. You see how fear, insecurity, and self-interest can alter decisions. All of this knowledge makes trust feel risky. Yet complete distrust creates its own problems. A person who trusts everyone becomes vulnerable to manipulation. A person who trusts no one becomes isolated. Both extremes create suffering. Many highly aware people struggle because they swing between these extremes. They want connection, but they fear disappointment. They want trust, but they see too many reasons to be cautious. They understand human nature so well that they sometimes forget that imperfection does not automatically equal danger. Eventually, a deeper realization begins to emerge. Not every truth requires immediate attention. Not every inconsistency demands investigation. Not every hidden motive deserves analysis. Not every flaw needs exposure. This realization marks an important turning point because awareness alone is not enough. Awareness can reveal reality, but it cannot tell you how to live with reality. It can show you what exists, but it cannot teach you what deserves your energy. This is where wisdom enters the picture. Wisdom is often confused with intelligence, yet the two are very different. Intelligence helps you notice. Wisdom helps you decide what matters. Intelligence gathers information. Wisdom filters information. Intelligence asks questions. Wisdom knows which questions are worth asking. Many people become highly aware but never become wise. They spend years observing human behavior without learning how to respond to it. They collect insights but lose peace. They gain understanding but lose balance. Wisdom begins when you realize that seeing clearly is only the first step. What matters next is how you carry that knowledge. Discernment becomes essential. Discernment is the ability to separate what is important from what is merely distracting. Without discernment, awareness becomes overwhelming. Every detail demands attention. Every issue feels urgent. Every problem appears significant. Discernment allows you to recognize that some truths matter deeply while others deserve very little energy. Not every flaw needs correction. Not every disagreement requires a response. Not every observation needs to become a conclusion. Compassion also becomes necessary. Without compassion, awareness can become cold. It becomes easy to focus on people's weaknesses while forgetting their struggles. It becomes easy to notice mistakes while ignoring circumstances. Human beings are complicated. They are often driven by fears they do not fully understand. They carry wounds that remain invisible. They make decisions influenced by experiences that others never see. Compassion does not excuse harmful behavior, but it creates understanding. It reminds you that awareness should deepen humanity, not reduce it. Patience plays an equally important role. Many truths reveal themselves slowly. Many people change gradually. Many situations require time. Awareness often creates a desire for immediate clarity. Patience teaches acceptance of uncertainty. It allows you to observe without forcing conclusions. It creates space between perception and reaction. Instead of immediately judging what you see, you learn to wait, you learn to watch, you learn to understand before deciding. Emotional balance becomes the foundation that holds everything together. Awareness without emotional balance creates anxiety. Awareness without emotional balance creates obsession. Awareness without emotional balance creates exhaustion. Emotional balance allows you to remain connected to reality without becoming consumed by it. You acknowledge human flaws without becoming bitter. You recognize risk without becoming fearful. You see deception without assuming everyone is deceptive. This changes the entire purpose of awareness. The goal is no longer to expose every illusion. The goal is no longer to prove how much you understand. The goal becomes learning how to see reality clearly while remaining emotionally healthy. It becomes learning how to recognize darkness without losing sight of light. It becomes learning how to understand people without constantly judging them. At this stage, an important distinction begins to emerge. Many people confuse awareness with cynicism because both involve seeing flaws. Both involve recognizing problems. Both involve understanding human weakness, yet they are fundamentally different ways of viewing the world. Awareness says, I understand human flaws. Cynicism says, human flaws define everything. Awareness recognizes selfishness, but it also recognizes generosity. Awareness understands manipulation, but it also understands sincerity. Awareness sees deception, but it also sees honesty. It does not ignore darkness, yet it refuses to believe darkness is all that exists. Cynicism operates differently. It takes real observations and turns them into absolute conclusions. It sees one act of selfishness and expects more selfishness. It sees one betrayal and expects more betrayal. It gradually closes itself off from possibilities that challenge its assumptions. The cynical person often believes they are being realistic, but in many cases they are simply protecting themselves from disappointment. Awareness remains curious. Cynicism becomes certain. Awareness stays open to evidence. Cynicism filters evidence. Awareness accepts complexity. Cynicism reduces complexity. Awareness understands that people can be both selfish and generous. Cynicism assumes selfishness will always win. This difference shapes every aspect of life. An aware person may recognize risk and still choose trust. Cynical person sees risk and avoids trust entirely. An aware person understands human imperfection and still seeks connection. A cynical person uses imperfection as a reason to withdraw. One path creates wisdom, the other creates distance. The more deeply you understand this distinction, the more carefully you begin watching your own mind. Because the greatest danger is not failing to see reality. The greatest danger is allowing reality to harden you until you stop seeing anything else. By now, one truth should be clear. Awareness changes everything. It strips away comforting illusions. It reveals patterns that most people never notice. It exposes contradictions, hidden motives, and the gap between appearance and reality. Once those patterns become visible, they rarely disappear. You begin seeing the world differently. You begin seeing people differently. And perhaps most importantly, you begin seeing yourself differently. But awareness alone is not the destination. Many people spend their lives chasing truth, believing that more knowledge will automatically bring peace. Yet peace does not come from seeing more. Peace comes from knowing what to do with what you see. Because awareness without balance can become a burden. It can lead to overthinking, emotional exhaustion, and isolation. It can convince you that every flaw deserves attention and every contradiction requires an answer. The deeper lesson is that wisdom is not found in constant analysis. Wisdom is found in balance. It is found in the ability to recognize reality without becoming trapped by it, to understand human flaws without becoming cynical, to see deception without assuming everyone is deceptive, to notice darkness without forgetting that light exists too. The clearest vision is not the ability to see darkness everywhere. It is the ability to see reality exactly as it is without losing your humanity. And that brings us to the silent punishment of seeing too clearly. It is not loneliness. It is not disappointment. It is not even the loss of comforting illusions. The real punishment is realizing that many truths cannot be explained to those who are not ready to see them. Some lessons cannot be taught. Some realities cannot be shared. Some insights must simply be carried, quietly, not because they are secrets, but because certain understandings can only be earned through experience. This is why maturity is not learning how to see more. It is learning how to live with what you see. It is learning when to speak and when to remain silent, when to engage and when to let go, when to search for answers and when to accept uncertainty. And perhaps the strongest people are not those who know the most, not those who expose every illusion, not those who win every argument, but those who can face reality completely, accept it honestly, and still keep their hearts open. Those who refuse to become bitter, those who refuse to become cynical, those who continue choosing wisdom over judgment and understanding over resentment. If this video resonated with you, take a moment and ask yourself a simple question. Has awareness brought you closer to peace, or has it quietly become another burden you carry? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We would love to hear your perspective. And if you enjoyed this journey into psychology, human nature, and the hidden realities that shape our lives, make sure to like this video, subscribe the channel, and share it with someone who sees the world a little differently. Your support helps us continue creating deep and thought-provoking content for people who are searching for understanding beyond the surface. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and remember, seeing clearly is powerful, but staying human while seeing clearly is true wisdom.